This meeting is being recorded.
Well, good morning. Thank you all so much for helping my project. Um, um, well, Madoka, Marquet, could y'all say a little bit about yourselves? Like, where do you live? What do you do? What do you do for fun? That type of thing.
I we currently live in Pax River, Maryland. I work over at the Navy base. I'm an aircraft mechanic. I work on helicopters specifically, and I like video games a lot. A lot.
Yeah. Do I say my name?
If you want to.
I don't know. So we live in Maryland. We moved here from Japan. I currently work at Anaplan, where you used to work. I don't know what too much to say. I watch a lot of space shows, TV series on, yeah.
Well, that's
I wasn't. Yeah.
That's cool. Marquette, what kind of video games do you play?
A little bit of everything. I like anything with a good story, honestly. I also like multiplayer games that I can play with my friends. Honestly, if my friends are playing it, I'll probably give it a try.
So it's more of a venture, action, story, mystery type of game.
Yeah.
And Madoka, what things do you like to read?
I play a lot of games with him too. We'll play Halo, Call of Duty, or story games together. And then for shows, what was that space show we watched?
The Apple TV one, right?
Yeah.
For All Mankind.
Well, he made me watch this show for All Mankind. Did you watch that?
I've seen season 1 and half of season 2.
Yeah, it was really good, and then that's how he got me hooked to it. And my first time I came to I visited the U.S. was I think 5 years ago.
Yeah.
The first thing he did was we went to Washington D.C. and then he brought me to the NASA.
The Air and Space Museum.
Air and Space Museum. Yeah, it was really nice.
And what were some of the things that really caught your attention there?
For me, it was the food. What kind of food they ate in space, and then I tried it. It was the dried strawberries.
Oh yeah.
Frozen strawberries. Yeah.
And then the flight simulator.
The flight simulator. That one was not very fun. It kept spinning. Yeah. You enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, did y'all know that NASA was planning to send astronauts to the moon again for the first time since 1972?
I didn't know that. I was surprised when you mentioned that at the meeting.
I didn't know. I think it's a good idea though. I feel like that'll probably be the technology we gain from going back to the moon again, kind of lessons learned thing will probably help us in the future.
Well, you're not alone for not knowing. My original plan was to interview people at Starbucks and on the street and, at the mall, which worked out great up until the COVID lockdowns. Then I kind of had to take a different approach. But I would say that pretty much 80% of people don't know that we're planning to go back to the moon. And I was wondering, what would it have taken for you to have known? Like, how do you get your news?
Um,
For me,
honestly,
social media, I guess, Facebook, Twitter. I guess, but I knew through you. I found out through you. Yeah.
um, honestly, if NASA would have released it, I think I would have
You
seen
would
it
have seen
probably
it. Yeah.
because I do follow them on most social media, and I do like the pictures that they post from all the rovers and everything, and all of the pictures from the satellites. From yeah,
Mm.
Now, it sounds like both of y'all see value in us going back to the moon. Did I get that right?
yes,
Now,
It's exactly.
now, not everybody is as enthusiastic. Some people are like, why are we spending billions of dollars to send people to the moon when we have, poverty and, global climate change and, just a whole host of issues down here on Earth. And I just wonder, how do you think about that kind of conversation?
um, for me, every time we do something like going to the moon or uh, send a rover to Mars, we improve the technology, and sometimes we get these jumps in technology that have nothing to do with the actual mission itself, but we get other things from it. And I think eventually we might need the technology that we develop from going to the moon or Mars in the future, and we just don't know it yet.
What do you think, Madoka?
Definitely improvement on the technology part. And then for me, I see very, very far into the future. Maybe we'll live, in different planets because we definitely need to expand. I'm not very good at that, but far into the future, hopefully we get to live in different planets, travel, have faster rockets. Yeah.
So talking about the future, so you think we'll become multiplanetary at some point?
For me, that's what I think. There should be other planets that have the resources we need. Hopefully, we can't be the only planet.
Yeah. At the rate we're going, we're kind of not going to have a choice. So I hope we figure something out before we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And what do you think would make it so we don't have a choice?
Um, Pretty much
Mhm.
climate change and global pollution, things like that.
Yeah.
I would say, based upon our understanding of all of the planets in the solar system, that regardless of how bad we mess up the Earth will still be easier to live on than any place else in the solar system that we could get to.
Yeah.
But do you think that in the future there is a possibility of us living in another planet or maybe taking resources? I don't know how far out that would be, but
Well, Elon Musk, so the founder of SpaceX, his vision is to have a 1 million-person city on Mars by 2050, and I think he could actually do it.
mhm. Yeah, hopefully 2050 will still be around.
Yeah.
Would you imagine if y'all saw an advertisement for, hey, come join us on Mars, start this new city? Is that something y'all would sign up for, or you'd be like, oh my gosh?
I know you
Um,
would.
no,
What?
no, you never want to be the first person with anything. I've learned that the hard way several times. You don't want to be the first person. You never want to be the experiment batch, and that's just a hard no for me.
Uh,
No.
what no, let's say there's already 500,000 people living there. You're the second 500,000.
Okay, then I think about it.
That would be fun. I want a different environment. I want to be looking at the sky with different planets, stars, different shapes. That would be fun.
I think
I don't know what the challenges will be living in another planet, but
Well, I think one of them is going to be, Mars has a very thin atmosphere. It's very, very cold. The atmosphere doesn't have oxygen in it. So you'd be like inside a building most of the time, and then you have to have a suit when you go out.
ooh,
yeah.
it's still a new environment for me. I'll try anything.
Well, trying might be a problem since it takes like 4 months to get there, and you can only do that once every 2 years. So it'll be a long-term try. You'll be able to come back in a couple of years, but it's not like you could dip your toe in the water and pull it right back out.
It's true. It's a big.
I don't know. I've already spent 4 months on a different kind of ship. I think I'll pass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a few questions?
Yeah, go for it.
So I remember in the meeting you said you'll be working in the mission control room. So what kind of things do you have to do and be careful of in there? Is it something you have to always have someone on standby? Do you have to have emergency, what do you call it? Emergency planning? I'm not sure what they call it. In case something happens, what are the emergency plans that you have in that room? Is there
So I only know what other people have told me about the job and what I've read. So I haven't actually started yet. I won't start into like another week or so. And then I really have a year to a year and a half of training to go through before I could actually do the job. But so on the International Space Station, you have a whole bunch of systems. Some of them are used to generate power, move power around, store power. Some of them are related to actually getting rid of heat on the International Space Station. So they have like these radiator panels with like ammonia that they circulate through these pipes and heat exchangers. So those systems are what my team would be responsible for. So things of making sure, do we have enough power for all the activities that we're planning to do? Whenever there is a shortage of power, making sure that the most critical systems are being, have priority to get that, such as the life support, communications. Maybe you have to postpone doing some experiments. One time there was a leak with those ammonia pipes. So there's some valves that you could turn on and off. You have some redundancy systems that you can switch to. So really the flight controller, when they're on console actually working, they're really monitoring all those systems, working with the other teams to make sure that they're clear on what's going on. And because there's other teams that are monitoring like the life support systems and the actual place where the astronaut lives. There's other teams that are responsible for communications. There's other teams that are responsible for the way that the space station is situated in space, which way it's pointing. So it's just really working with all of those teams. But you're only on console inside of mission control 1 week out of the month. You have enough people to kind of cover that. The other 3 weeks, you're really doing planning of missions, training for missions, and that type of thing. So
one week, and then each week people change. Is that what you're saying? I think
so.
Well, it's a 24/7 job. So you have shift work. So you'll have teams of people rotating in. So they have to have enough people to cover all those shifts. And then you're not working the, week to week. You're doing the planning and the training for the other weeks.
That sounds really exciting.
Yeah, it's gonna be really different. And what I'm really excited about is actually having a NASA badge, being able to go onto the NASA facility and have lunch with NASA people. I think that's kind of cool.
You're living the dream, because we watch it in the movies all the time. We never know anyone who actually worked in there.
Well, actually, I know 2 pilots that are training to be astronauts from the Reagan because
Wow.
they like to pull Navy jet pilots as astronauts. So I didn't know them personally, but I was on the same ship as them. And when they got accepted into the program, they always do an announcement for them before they fly off. So I'm I'm really interested in what you said because of the troubleshooting aspect of it, where you said that you have to plan for all the systems and you have to work with the engineers and kind of plan if something does go wrong, what the options are. Because I know how hard that is to do with information you already have. So doing it with information that you're gathering in real time just seems impossible to me. That I've always been really impressed with that because that takes a really smart person to plan for things that could happen instead of things that already did happen.
I hear the training is really rigorous and a lot of memory based. The systems you're responsible for, they want you to be able to draw the schematics by memory, and then walk through stuff and say, well, if this happens, what would you do? If this happens, what would you do? And so you do a lot of this. That's part of the training and planning part, is all that contingency planning. What if a meteor hits this critical component? What are you gonna how are you gonna resolve that?
Yeah, that's a lot of impressive. I mean, I work on things that way smaller, and I still have trouble memorizing what I should do when certain things happen. I mean, I've always been impressed by their ability to do that. That's cool.
I hear the next year and a half or so is going to be like going back to college. So like really really hoping that I do a good job.
I'm sure you'll.
I mean, I don't think you'll have a lack of anything interesting that like. I don't think it'll be that hard because I mean, these are real things. Like you're not just studying history as part of like a general studies. Like this is like she told me this is something that you're really passionate about. So
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think the thing that probably keeps you awake all the time is the flight controllers have kind of like this code or creed that they have. But the last part of it is to always be aware that suddenly and unexpectedly, your decisions might have ultimate consequences. And so that's one thing that could always keep you up.
oh,
Is there something where you have to make a decision, like at the last resort? I'm not sure if this is okay to say, to eliminate or.
well, well for other like aircrafts and maintenance type things, it's always personnel first. So it would be how can we save the personnel, and then it's how can we salvage the most valuable assets.
Is it the same for?
Yeah, it's always the same because it's always personnel, then most valuable assets, then mission.
Are people nervous about sending human to the moon in 2024? What kind of precautions? What kind of I guess worrying? What do you call that?
Precaution?
Yeah. What precaution? What are you worried about sending people to the moon in 2024? Is it something?
I think they're worried about everything really. I mean, one thing with Apollo, they only sent 3 astronauts. 2 of them went down to the surface, so you had like this one astronaut that was in orbit by himself. So he had like absolutely no one to back him up. And there's a story. I think the first astronaut that was like alone by himself, Mike Collins. Apparently, he did this maneuver to accelerate the capsule, and it pushed him back in his chair, and he couldn't reach the the controls, because I guess the chairs swivel, but he was able to finally get out of there. But it's a really scary moment. So with the Artemis program, they're planning to send 4 people. 2 would go down to the surface and 2 would be in orbit. So that's kind of like one of the safety improvements that they have. Always bring a buddy, right?
Yeah. Didn't the rocket explode sometime?
Yeah.
Is that okay to talk?
I mean, that's kind of part of the process. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the terrible part of the process.
I'm not
But
sure when
it's-
it was, but the rocket exploded when it took off. I'm not sure what company that was.
Was it the SpaceX resupply mission? Oh, no, not the SpaceX resupply mission. Is this in 2016? Like, I think September 1st, 2016, SpaceX was fueling a rocket and it exploded on the launch pad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
I mean, there's a really small margin of error when it comes to like spacecrafts.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
everything's got to be exactly where it needs to be. It's a very very small margin of error. But NASA's gotten it down to a science, and they have like the best engineers in the world.
Okay. Yeah.
They only hire the best.
How long will they be on the moon if they go up 2024? And what kind of things are they trying to accomplish this time?
Well, so I guess several things. One is in the Apollo program, we were actually on the moon for only hours at a time. So with the Artemis program, we're planning to be there for days, and maybe even a week or 2. Oh, one challenge you have with the moon is each day on the moon is 28 Earth days. And during the 14 days that you have sunlight on the part of the moon that you're on, it's very, very hot. It's like 100 degrees Celsius. And then, on the part that's facing away from the sun, when you're in, lunar night, it's very, very cold, like minus 200 degrees Celsius. So it's like really difficult to survive those lunar nights. So also another thing I should tell you is whenever I started the project in 2019, the plan was to land people on the moon in 2024. But about 2 months ago, NASA came out and said that they think it's going to be like 2025. And even some other people said, that they think it's going to be a little bit longer than that. So that kind of, that's a little disappointing to see those schedules slip, but not unexpected, I suppose. Some things they hope to do. Last time that we landed on the moon, we landed around the equator. This time we're planning to land around the South Pole. And we really want to see, we've discovered through observations from orbit that there are a water ice that's permanently frozen in these permanently shadowed craters that we think we could get to. And we want to prove out and see that resource is really there. And there's a whole document in terms of what kind of things they like to explore, understand a little bit more about what the moon's made out of. Are any of those resources useful to us? Anything new and unique? One of the things is meteors are constantly striking the Earth, like 24/7. There's meteors all the time, but most of them burn up in the atmosphere. And the ones that don't burn up in the atmosphere usually land in water, because most of the oceans and seas cover up most of the surface of the Earth. And then the ones that land on land, the evidence of them doesn't stay around for long because, you have weather and, vegetation and, you have these active processes. But the moon's been traveling through the same volume of space as the Earth. And so, a proportion of those same meteors have been hitting the moon. But since it doesn't have weather, doesn't have, vegetation, doesn't have thing, and the moon is like a record of all these impacts that have been hitting the Earth-Moon system for the last millions of years. So, I think we could learn a lot about how historically dangerous has the environment that the Earth and Moon been in over the past, thousands and millions of years? And can we learn something that might help us understand the dangers in the future and potentially understand are there things that we need to plan to survive? I mean, you could imagine having like some type of huge cloud of debris that's in like this 10,000-year orbit around the sun, right? And you start studying the impact of these meteors, and you're like, 40,000 years ago there was all these things that hit the moon, and then 30,000 years ago there's all these things that hit the moon, and you're like 20,000, and so then you're like, that there might be something to look for, and you look for and find it, and then you're like, oh well, this is what we could do to make sure it doesn't hurt us so badly.
Yeah.
Why did we choose to land on the moon of all planets? Is it because moon is the only
I mean, it's
visible?
It's the closest, and it's the only one that's not like on fire or covered in gas.
I was going to say why not the sun, but it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the moon we were able to get to in 3 days. We could have gotten there faster. The reason it took 3 days is because going that speed, you're going slow enough that the moon's gravity will capture you. If you go any faster, you need to be able to slow down, otherwise you just shoot past the moon. I think the astronauts were like, yeah, 3 days is good. But the moon is also always next to the Earth. I mean, 3 days, any time of the year. Whereas Mars, Mars takes 2 years and 2 months to go around the sun. And there's only every 2 years is there an alignment that is really easy for the Earth, for things to go from Earth to Mars. So, and plus, pretty much like on the International Space Station on Apollo, all those astronauts were supported by people on the ground, really solving any problems, supporting them, making sure everything's working right. The people that go to Mars, initially they'll be very close to the Earth, but at some point, the time delay would be like 15 minutes one direction for, messages to go back and forth. So they're essentially going to be on their own to solve any problems that they come up with, which means they need to have all the backups and all the skills, and it's going to be really challenging for them. They'll be more like the explorers that went to Antarctica like 100 years ago than, like most astronauts.
Yeah, that's a no-go for
me. Why?
No, the idea that there's a lot of things that I don't like about unknown things. I don't like experimental things.
You watch someone.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Because from my point of view, when it just comes to the aircraft part of it, it takes them a while to get it right. And there's certain lessons that you don't learn until they break, and then you don't know when they're gonna break. You can only guess. And yeah, again, you never want. I don't want to be the first one. I need them to figure it out.
Yeah, the Elon Musk, he's like, I want to die on Mars, just not on impact. So
No.
Yeah.
That's a man who understands that there's going to be a lot of trial and error. So a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Like old age. He wants to be the old man on Mars, not the.
Yeah. Mars would be.
I mean, if you could do it in our lifetime, I'd love to see it.
Well, have you seen what SpaceX is doing in South Texas?
I haven't seen.
You mean with the reusable rockets, or?
Yeah, with the Starship and Super Heavy. It's down there near Brownsville. So, I mean, one of the problems with space travel is essentially the people that created rockets for people and for launching satellites are the same people that created missiles. And the idea of reusing a missile is just not there. But I mean, basically you build this $100 million craft to use only one time, and nothing can go wrong. So you have to test every single thing, and you're still not sure everything's gonna go right. But if we could just create like a rocket that you could fly, land, inspect, refuel, fly, land, inspect. I mean, most airplanes like a 747 or one of these big Boeing Starliners, they cost about $100 million too. But you're able to buy a seat on them for, $100, $200, because, they're going to make like 100,000 trips in their lifetime. Um, so, so that's what he's working on in uh, South Texas. And he's actually built some prototypes. He tested some out last year. He's planning to do a kind of more testing this year, but it looks like he might actually make it happen. And I think whenever he does, it'll be like, I mean, the cost of going to space will become so much lower than it is now, that the activity will greatly increase. And then that would just generate more enthusiasm, investment, activity. And I think in 2030, we're going to be doing stuff in space that we've only been talking about, and only the craziest ones of us have been imagining will become everyday things.
2030 is not that far. I thought, going to different planets would take longer, but it's not that long away.
I mean, it all depends on, because once he figures that out, then somebody else will improve on that design, and then it'll keep getting better and better and better.
But is this something only people in the US do, or are you collaborating with different countries?
Russia's space program has always been pretty close to ours as far as like technology goes. They're just a little bit quicker.
So for the 2024 one, we'll only have people in the States, right? It's not a collaboration with different countries.
Well, it's interesting you say that. So NASA currently has, the Artemis mission 1 is sending a uncrewed vehicle around the moon and back, just to test to make sure all the systems are working. So that's happening this year. Artemis 2 is just to send the astronauts around the moon. Now in Artemis 2, there's already been a deal struck with the Canadian Space Agency to send the Canadian astronaut. So this will be the first time that somebody else from another country has been around the moon. Artemis 3 is supposed to send 2 astronauts around the moon and 2 to land on the surface. And I understand that Japan is really wanting one of those astronauts to be Japanese. And I think they're building like a rover for the astronauts to travel around on the moon, so they could go see more. And Europe is a collaborator too. They're actually building part of the rocket that's going to take them to the moon. So there's been that. But you mentioned Russia. I think it's also worthwhile to note about China. China has talked about sending people to the moon in 2035, but then just recently they said they think they could do it 8 years earlier and maybe make it in 2027. And the American program gets delayed more, and they're able to pull it up. You might actually see the first people on the moon this century would be Chinese.
Another race to the moon, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. The idea of the timeline getting shorter by that much does not sound like a good idea to me.
But they built a space station this year. They've like doubled the launches that they've done in the past 5 years compared to the previous past 5 years. So they've been getting a lot more aggressive. And I think they would be very. I think that would be more impactful than winning more gold medals at the Olympics for them.
Yes. Yeah.
But what do you think about that? Does it matter if China gets there before the Americans? I mean, how do you think about that?
The show we were watching about how which country gets there first. What was that?
Are you talking about Space Force or?
No. The show we watched on Apple TV.
Oh,
Because Russia, well, that's different. Still, they were fighting for who gets there first, who gets to find a good spot to experiment, and then it became a whole thing where it was, what do you call that? Fighting over the land on the moon between Russia and US. Yeah. Maybe it could be
I think it's more of just a pride thing. I mean, of course, you want to see the home team win, but I don't know. Maybe China will figure out something we haven't, and if they do, I hope that they're. I don't want to say like willing to share it, but kind of like a more of an advancement of humans and not just an advancement of Chinese technology. If that makes any sense.
It does. But I guess, what do you think the reaction of like the American people would be? Would they be like, so what? We were there in the 60s and 70s. You're just catching up, or would they be like, oh my gosh, we've really fallen behind? Which way do you think most Americans would go?
It would absolutely be a we've fallen behind type thing.
US should be one of the fastest growing.
Yeah, it's like if
country.
It kind of makes it seem like like we kind of slowed down tremendously once we got there. It's like, okay, we did it.
And then that's gonna be how, because everyone's thinking China is gonna take over US as one of the strongest country, and then the moon part could be one of the contributing facts where China might be leading more than US in the future. I don't know. Hopefully US goes first. Hopefully.
Awesome.
I'm rooting.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think about these countries, like maybe India, and maybe even other countries that don't have space agencies going, hey guys, save some room for us. What y'all doing up there?
I mean, it's a super expensive program, so I mean, it's one of those things where if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. I mean, we could do things to try to like train astronauts from other countries and stuff like that, and maybe they have engineers that might be better than our own, but yeah, I mean, it would be more contributing to our space program than building their own. It's just getting theirs off the ground. That's a lot of money.
But 100 years ago, we didn't have a space program either. So, how do we strike that balance between people that could go today and people who might want to go later? And does that matter at all?
I don't. That would be interesting if there was, instead of it just being like like NASA just being a U.S. thing, and kind of creating like a United Nations, but for space. I mean, it's something to think about. Because then it would be global funding instead of just, us funding it or other countries that support the research. So that would be not a bad idea.
Let's say your great granddaughter was born on Mars and grew up her entire life on Mars, right? And she's in high school now. She's having to do this paper for social studies, or history or whatever. And the paper is, what were people thinking on Earth before the next time we stepped foot on the moon? What was it like on Earth before the next time we stepped on the moon? And she comes and she sees this video that we're recording right now for her paper. Do you have any kind of tidbit or insight that you'd like to share with her that could potentially help her get an A on that paper. No pressure.
Huh.
Don't make the same mistake twice.
What?
You actually pay attention in history class, because there's a lot of answers that were figured out the hard way, and some people just keep repeating them.
I don't know. Yes. Always learn about where your ancestors came from, I guess. Always understand where origins, what the origins are, Earth. Will they have plants there? I don't know, but
They're gonna figure something out.
yeah. We have forests, we have rivers, nature, all the space we used to have. Yeah. It's weird thinking that you're gonna give a message to someone hundreds of years later. It's not something. Yeah.
But sometimes a good way to think about the problem is imagine you saw a message from one of your ancestors from like 100 years ago. What would you find? What would you want them to talk to you about? Like,
How survival. I'm more interested to know how their day-to-day life was, because I know some things are not actually written or found. Yeah. Maybe in recording our day-to-day lives, showing what we do, what was the things they used to do a lot hundreds of years later, then we can compare it. It's always fun to see how things changed over the centuries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you always pass on things to make things simplified and easier to do. So
I hope my great granddaughter is not stuck in a small space because we're out of space. So they go to another planet and then they're stuck in this small room. You know, we have all this space, but for some reason the way I think of future hundreds of years later is we're in this tiny room. We don't have all this luxury and space anymore. That's how I think of the future. I don't know why. But, yeah.
it could be the impact from COVID lockdowns and working from home for the past 2 years. That
I think so. Yeah.
that's kind of made the world feel a lot smaller in the sense of, you know, you wake up in the room, you work in the room, you go sleep in the room. You know.
Maybe. Remember how it is hundreds of years later. My great granddaughter, remember you had all this space, you had trees. I don't know. I hope we still have that.
no, there's always gonna have to be somebody who actually like fixes it.
I know.
So that I mean, a lot of things will become automated, but you know, someone's always got to turn the wrench.
Well, it sounds like y'all have a little hesitancy about going to Mars and trying things for the first time.
Absolutely.
But if it was safe and affordable and a million people had already gone to space before, would you take a trip to like orbit or to the moon?
Yes,
I would.
100%.
Yes.
That's a 2-day trip. Absolutely.
Well, I know we covered a lot of material and a lot of ground. And was there anything else that y'all wanted to talk about, or did you have any other questions for me?
I can't think of. I think we already covered it because I just like we talked about mission control. That was the part that I was interested in. But
Ooh. So I remember someone mentioned that NASA hasn't figured out how to bring down the panel back to Earth. Is that something? Is it a error or just something they were like, oh, we're gonna put it up and we're not gonna bring it down, or we're gonna figure it out later?
Are you talking about the International Space Station or something else?
Space station.
Yeah,
What's the
I think the plan with the International Space Station is to extend operations to 2030, and then 2031 to cause it to slow down enough so it gets in the atmosphere and it'll crash land. Well, it'll burn up mostly, but somewhere over the South Pacific, which is a big stretch of water that doesn't have hardly anybody living there. I'm sure the people that do live there are like, hey, we matter too. It's not just zero odds, you know. I know it's really small, but yeah.
There was, I know I always reference a lot of movies. That's why I get all my imagination from the trash that orbits around the Earth. So all those trash, is there a way to filter or take? Because there's a movie where all those trash that orbits really fast hit one of the space station, and then
I think that was Gravity with Sandra Bullock.
yes, is that a real thing that could happen? You know, is there really that many trash orbiting?
Well, you know, one problem is in order to stay in orbit, you have to go really, really fast because there is gravity in space. And, you know, the International Space Station is being pulled towards the Earth, but since it's going so fast forward, it's kind of following at the same rate that Earth is curving. So it goes around the Earth every 90 minutes, just to give you an idea of how fast the International Space Station is going. But anything that's in orbit is going really, really, really fast, like, you know, tens of thousands of miles per hour. So it hits anything, you know, if you make water go fast enough, it can cut through steel, right? So it doesn't matter what it's made out of or how small it is. It can do a lot of damage. It cleaning up space is like trying to clean up the battlefield while the battle is happening and picking the bullets out of the air. That's what it's like to clean up space.
No, have they ever tried cleaning up space, or is it something they're thinking about? Is it?
We've gotten a lot more responsible. Before launching anything in the United States, you have to have a plan for what you're going to do with it at the end of its life. Are you going to deorbit it? Are you going? They also put things in very, very high orbits. They call them graveyard orbits, where they're less likely to affect anybody or anything. So like the geosynchronous orbit. So if you're far enough away from Earth, you could get your you know, the amount of time it takes to go around the Earth becomes longer and longer. So there's this place, I think it's like 36,000 miles away, where things are orbiting once every 24 hours. And if you put them in the right plane and everything, then you'll have that satellite over the same part of the Earth. So those things are so far away, it'd be hard to deorbit them. So it'd be easier just to push them out further. And then you have like, you know, a whole bunch of satellites that are really close that are going around the Earth, you know, every hour, every 2 hours, every 90 minutes, that type of thing. Those would be easier to slow down just a little bit. So then their altitude decreases, and then it starts getting slowed down further by the atmosphere, and then they'll decay. Eventually, everything that's within, you know, I think 200 miles, 300 miles of the Earth will eventually slow down enough to automatically clean up. It might take hundreds of years. But then there's this place where, you know, there's virtually no atmosphere that, you know, once you go a certain speed, you'll always be at that speed, and cleaning up that is going to be hard for small things. But I think we have some challenges there. Maybe we could do something with like magnets or some type of laser, and you know, kind of we could take the bigger stuff and vaporize it and make it into little clouds of air. But
Yeah, that would be interesting to see. Yeah.
Marquet, I was wanting to get the spelling of your name.
Oh, Marquet.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate y'all's time, and I hope our paths cross again. And I was planning to have a huge party at the end of my project at the end of 2024. So you have to come down for that to Houston.
We'd love to. If we could connect on Facebook, and then I would love to see what happens, what you do at NASA. Maybe if you'll be updating it on Facebook, I would love to look at them. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll send you my Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter links. So it'd be great to stay in contact that way at least.
Yes, because 2024 we'll be there for the party.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan.
Thank you all. You'll have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
You too. All the best.